I'd like to welcome everyone to the January 23rd Board of Education meeting. At this time, I'd like to have a roll call. All board members need to vote yes and hit confirm.
I did that.
Mr. Forrest.
I know, I did it.
Hit confirm.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I ask Barbara Owens to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I call on Ralph Love for a moment of silence.
Let us prepare to bow our heads in a moment of silence, of remembrance of especially Dr. Matthew Ward's family, who's a member of this board, and all of the families and employees and friends of Pitt County Schools. May we bow our heads. Thank you.
At this time, adjustments to the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Let's vote.
Sorry, I don't know what we're voting on.
Okay. At this time, we've got public expressions. Call on Walt Pollard. You have 3 minutes.
How you doing? My name's Walt Pollard. I'm here about the moving football in middle school to the wintertime. I've coached for the last 23 years. About 15 of it has been at Rose High School, but I've also coached at DB Aycock and Epps Middle School. Epps Middle School was where I coached at last year. In my opinion, football is just not a winter sport. And I've had a lot of experience with football, being that I've coached all these years. Football is different from just about any other sport. Your primary objective is to bring players to the ground. You're in contact with the ground on almost every play. You're going to practice for an hour and a half to 2 hours out in the type of weather that we had yesterday in the 30s and 40s with a wet ground like we had yesterday. And the kids are going to get saturated, the ground's going to be wet, and you're going to be standing outside for 2.5 hours every day in that type of weather. I've been coaching a long time, and I don't even know if I want to stand out in that type of weather for 2.5 hours, much less subject the kids to that type of thing. You know, I was watching football yesterday, a big football fan, and most of those players that you see in the NFL are equipped with clothing, special clothing underneath their pads in order to keep them warm in that type of weather, in New England especially. But if you've noticed, most of those players have a full covering all over them, and that's not something that we can provide to our players financially. I'm sure it's a very expensive process. I think also the potential for the kids to be almost constantly sick from being exposed to that type of weather and being kept out that long, you know, would be an issue. I could foresee a lot of our practices being called off during the weather problems due to it just being so cold outside. Then as a football coach, I'd want to move my practice inside. I'd want to go into a gym. Potential for injury in a gym is just a lot greater. You're just on a hard surface. There's not a whole lot you can really do or get done. Not a lot of valuable time that can be spent inside a gym when you're trying to practice football. Also, your 8th graders, they're going to be finishing up their football season, and in a month or two, they're going to be stepping right back into high school football. They're going to have very, very little time to rest and recuperate from, which is a pretty grueling physical sport. So they're gonna step right off of one football field onto another If you look at how football seasons run, it's going to put a player playing almost a consecutive back-to-back football season, which to me is injury-wise going to be a problem. I've been told that there would be trainers at every game, and I think having a trainer at a game is really good. But I look at a trainer as a maintenance person. They maintain a football player. They're someone who needs to, be in yes, sir.
Time's up.
Okay. All right.
Mind to close it up.
Okay. I was just going to say about the trainers, they're more of a maintenance person. We need emergency personnel at a football game, like a first responder that can respond to an injury. And the trainers can do that, but I think a first responder would be better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stanley Nichols.
Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of the issue about middle school sports. Am I allowed to pass out some information? I just want to speak briefly on a few things. Walt covered most of it. I spoke with Bob Guthrie, who's the athletic director from Wake County Schools, and I received this email on the first page from him last week concerning the issue of changing the sports from fall to spring. And he, on his email, he stated that this was an issue that DPI was it was a DPI ruling. That DPI said that football should be played in the fall. And I called DPI this morning in the State Board of Education, and they referred me back to DPI and an individual named Les Spell, and he was unavailable. The second page is a letter I got from Tim Brayboy, who was a counselor for the DPI. And in his letter, as you can state, that he was a counselor, and his letter also stated that football should be played as a fall sport. And he gave a lot of reasons why, a lot of them what Walt spoke on. The third page is just a breakdown of the weather pattern that we have in Greenville from 2011 to 1977. And it shows the average temperature is about 35 degrees with precipitation last year was almost 2.7 inches of rain, and we had a half inch of snow March the 11th. That's tough conditions to play football in. In March, it doesn't get much better. The average temperature is about 39.9 degrees. For the cold days, 39. Average is about 51. In March, we had 5.5 inches of rain. And again, that makes it tough to play football on those fields and those conditions. And I understand one of the concerns is about the heat-related injuries. But when you start playing on a wet football field, I'm concerned about the kids' knees, ACLs, MCLs being torn, slipping, because the cleats are not going to do you any good on a sloppy football field like that. And I would just wish that y'all would keep it as it is. If it's not broke, no need to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, on Spotlight Teaching and Learning, Tim DeCrease.
Happy New Year. You too. I'm glad to be here with you all this evening. I'm excited to talk to you about media programs and what we're doing across Pitt County schools. As you know, most classrooms, most programs are undergoing a transformation from a traditional way of teaching to a more collaborative environment, and that's what we're trying to do with media programs. Our goal for the media program is to support the media coordinator, give them the tools that they need to be successful, to advocate for the programs, to expand the programs, equip them with the knowledge and tools to work with their staff and with the students to bring them into 21st century goals, moving us forward towards common core and essential standards. Over the past 4.5 years, we've made steady progress towards those goals. I'm blessed to have a wonderful staff that is dedicated and passionate about media program. While it's my job to provide the overall vision and direction for media programming, I am blessed to have Joanna Gerakis, who is a former media coordinator at Aiden Middle. She kind of takes care of the the nuts and bolts of media programming and the finer details to implement that, since that's where she came from, that's where her roots are at. And so I wanted to give her an opportunity to share with you all what we're doing across the district and how we have spent the last 4 years working with the media coordinators to expand the learning and teaching environment in Pitt County schools.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I'd like to start with just sharing a little bit about our vision. We want to see students becoming competent readers and effective users of information and technology tools while learning to contribute responsibly in a global 21st society. And for many students, the School Library Media Center is the only library they ever visit and their primary opportunity to connect with books. Our school libraries support both reading to learn and reading for pleasure by providing books and resources of all types, fiction, nonfiction, reference, and both print and electronic format. And we're working to have flexible media centers that can adapt to changing needs. We also want our library media centers to be a place where students can discover that special book that will hook them into reading and start them on the path to being a lifelong learner. One area where we've made a lot of progress that we're proud of is media center makeovers. And since school year 07-08, we've been able to transform 12 media centers into more modern, safe, welcoming, and technology-friendly learning environments. In addition to what the district has been able to do as far as carpet, paint, wiring, and those kind of things that we need to update the media centers, our media coordinators have written grants totaling just shy of $600,000 to refurnish and reorganize the facilities. And then along with that, to update our collections, they have written grants for over $137,000 worth of grant money to help their collections keep from being outdated. These efforts are helping us to make better use of technology and actively engage students. And these are just a few before and after pictures. The shelves there, you can see they were, shelves were being held up by old books that were ready to be discarded. And then we've got a table there with a broken leg. But I want to emphasize that the task is not just cosmetic. We want to create inviting learning environments where 21st century tools and functional spaces to work collaboratively and independently in small groups and in large groups, and where they can learn inquiry-based projects that require critical thinking. So as you can see in the pictures there, we've got areas for large groups, small groups, and also we're bringing the smart boards and computers and those types of things into the media centers.
All right, for our next point, I learned a long time ago that if you want to be successful in anything, you got to have a plan. So without a plan, you're just really wandering around. So the first thing you got to do is have a plan. The second thing you got to do is work your plan. And then finally, you got to let the plan work for you. So that's what we've been doing over the last 4 years. Is we had a plan coming in, we've been working that plan, and now we're to the point where we feel like that plan can start working for us. So it's just been small steps moving forward. But what I want to do tonight is really highlight what one of our media programs in Pitt County at North Pitt has really taken on the staff development that we've done over the last few years and taken it back to their school. And Laura Mangum is a shining example of when you take the training that you've been giving, intrinsically use it as a point to, man, I can change my environment, and then go back and actually try to implement your own plan in your building, what a difference it can make. And so I want to give Laura Mangum and Sarah Levin, the two media coordinators at North Pitt, a chance to come up here and talk to you about what they're doing at their school to really transition not only their staff but their students into the 21st century. And they are wonderful examples of what you can do when you want to accomplish something in your school.
Good evening. When I started at North Pitt 8 years ago, my goal was to increase collaboration with classroom teachers in order to help them learn how to design student-centered assignments and projects and to see how the media program can support their curriculum and classroom goals. To accomplish this goal, I have used several tactics. One of the most effective has been offering continual staff development during their planning periods. Through the years, I have offered training on software programs that teachers can use for student projects or to design their own lessons. During the trainings, I emphasize my philosophy that I'm available for further classroom support by working with the teachers and students through the whole project: planning, implementing, technical support, evaluation, and reflection. As a result of these staff development sessions, more and more teachers are using what they have learned to create student-centered lessons and projects and have become taking steps towards changing their teaching into more of a facilitator role. With last year's addition of another media coordinator and an instructional coach, we have made a dynamic team that works towards this same goal, and we are able to help more teachers and students. One example is this past semester, the instructional coach and I helped a history teacher plan and teach a unit of interactive student-centered lessons focused on his Goal 12 curriculum. Another way the media program supports classroom teachers is on an individual level. We seek out opportunities to introduce teachers to new lesson ideas. For example, another history teacher was passing through the library one day and commented on how much he liked our Constitutional Day book display. And he said he'd like to do some book reports on those types of books. Well, I suggested doing audiobook talks using VoiceThread. It was a very successful project. Also, it used expository text, which is common as a requirement in the Common Core. We also present staff development to departments. I have worked closely with the English department to update the research paper process to make it an almost paperless process using Noodle Tools and EasyBib. These are online tools that the students use to do citations, note cards, and outlines. When using these programs, we often co-teach a majority of the lessons with the classroom teachers to offer that support. Another way I've impacted classroom instruction is through training and supporting teachers in using the e-instruction software with the clickers and the interactive handheld boards that helps them analyze data quickly so they know what they need to reteach, and also gives them an avenue with the handheld boards to have that student interactive technology. Last year I began a new venture in collaboration with the guidance counselors and an ECU professor in developing an online resource center of mental health resources for students. The collaboration is based on Dr. Dotson Blake's chapter that she published in the book Educational Media and Technology Yearbook. And my role was to help the guidance counselors develop a website and offer that support. And then I developed a unit for my student assistants in the library to create annotated bibliographies of resources that we have in the library and online dealing with mental health topics that our students deal with. The guidance counselors then met with ninth graders and featured the new resource and allowed them to check out books. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Levin. I'm the other media coordinator at North Pitt High School, and thank you for allowing us to come and present to you today. Tonight I'm highlighting the book and storytelling club that we have at my school called Panther Tales. And it's TALES. It's we're the North Pitt Panthers. The storytelling aspect of Panther Tales has members working together to create a script, sound effect track, and portable scenery for traditional folk tales. So our students they go through a list of folk tales, they research for them. I've had students come up and say, hey, I found this one, try this one out. They take that folk tale and they adapt it into a script. And they're going to perform their folk tales this April in a storytelling festival, which will be for our third grade students in Pitt County schools. at our school. So they get an in-county field trip, which they're really looking forward to. Panther Tales has provided an opportunity for students to step up as educational leaders. For example, students who are involved in our school's theater program are using their knowledge to coach and direct their fellow club members and have been assisting with the auditions. The entire club enjoys giving book suggestions to other students as well as assisting as tutors in multiple subjects. The students are looking forward to being reading role models to the third graders and anticipate many new members once these students are in high school. Club members have also formed a tight-knit support group. Our club is all 4 grade levels at my school, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all racial demographics. We cover everybody, everybody's welcome, and it's not just words. The students and staff make sure that it is in action. Last year, the majority of our club members were 9th graders who often felt overwhelmed and in some cases out of place. They were in a big school, first year there, the low people on the totem pole. You kind of know the feeling. And the club members worked together to help when needed, and they discovered that the library was a safe haven, a good place to hang out during their lunchtime or before school, or whenever they had a moment of downtime. It was a safe place for them. And this year, our 9th grade members have not had these issues, in part because the returning club members befriended them from the very beginning. So our students are stepping up and providing that support, that safety net for those students, 9th graders who really do feel left out in a lot of cases. And it's just been a real joy to work with them. We had our first round of auditions today, and I'm just all sorts of impressed with my students. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. One other thing that I'd like to share with you all that is an opportunity to showcase these types of neat activities that we have going on in the school and also do some fundraising is coming up in the month of February. We've teamed up with Barnes & Nobles to have a month-long book fair, and last year our book fair raised close to $15,000 to go towards our school libraries. But it's not just about the fundraising. Each school has a school spirit night at some point during the month of February, and so we have a schedule of those events if you'd like to see what's going on, but we'll be featuring all kinds of things like theatrical readings, musical performances. Some schools bring out their cheerleaders, set up art galleries, so all kinds of neat activities that will be going on during the month of February. And we would love to have you all join us if you can, any of those nights. And also on February 1st will be our kickoff night. And that night we will have Mike Litwin, who lives here in Greenville and is the illustrator of 2 children's books. One is a New York Times bestseller, and he's also illustrated The Adventures of Petey the Pirate, so you may be familiar with him that way. But we would, again, like I said, we'd love to have you all come out any of those nights. And I see the handout is going around. So the very last thing we have for you is just a brief video that highlights some of the things that are happening in our media centers throughout the county.
Thank you. At this time, we have consent items. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Let's vote. Christine?
I'm sorry.
Okay. At this time, I call on Raph Love and Delilah Jackson. Human Resources update.
At this time, the latter will come and present us with an update on human resources.
Good evening.
Good evening.
At your seat, you should have a copy of qualified observers approval list. Based on our new policy for implementation of mandatory improvement plans, it should be one single sheet that has a list of names.
It's in the,
I think it's in the addendum packet.
right.
Based on the new implementation of growth plans by the Department of Public Instruction and our state legislators and General Assembly, we do have a new method called mandatory improvement plans. And we are required by the implementation of those plans to provide teachers the ability to have a qualified observer to come and observe their classroom at the end of their 60 instructional days for their mandatory improvement plan. We have met with PCAE, with their president, who has there in turn met with their executive board to come up with a list of names that they provided to us that we reviewed as far as the district level, and we are presenting this list to you today for approval to be qualified observers. This is just the first list. We do have a couple more that we're waiting approval from, because of course we would not want to put a teacher or an administrator in a situation where they were not feeling comfortable to do this and did not feel that they could be unbiased. So the ones that you have been approved by the administrator, have accepted our invitation to be a qualified observer, and have been reviewed by the district and also PCAE. And it was suggested through legal counsel and the School Board Association that we have a mutual list that was agreed upon by both groups. It did state that no action is required, but we would like to submit this list for approval for you today.
Motion
to approve.
Second.
Let's vote.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
And I did, Mr. Chair, Bishop Love, we are not having a Human Resources Committee meeting tomorrow, so we did want to update you. So if you have any questions, please contact myself or Bishop Love.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This time we have EPS, Mark and Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, if Ms. Cheryl Olmsted would come forward. And
Good evening.
good evening.
We had our EPS Board Committee meeting on January the 5th. There was no board action is required, but we did talk about a student wellness procedure at that EPS Board Committee that is in your packet. It's in your, and I've asked Alice Keene and Rita Roy to come and talk a little bit about it, just to kind of give you a little bit of information about what changes are there and why they're there, and if you have any questions for them. So, Alice and Rita, would y'all like to come up? You can kind of highlight the changes that were necessary and why.
Good evening. Basically, the additions to the student wellness policy procedure were around safe routes to school. And with our Communities Putting Prevention to Work grant, we wanted to reach out and try to present avenues for increasing physical activity for students walking and biking to school. So in order to do that and make it a part of our policy, we enter that into our student wellness procedure. And basically, it just asks that our schools work with the principals and the parents in the community in order to develop things like a walking school bus, which Cheryl's very familiar with, that we were able to do at Ridgewood, that's been very successful. And as we're able and it's safe for students to walk or bike to school, we want to work with the community in making this available and possible. There were a couple of other updates to the policy in regards to our child nutrition program, but these were very minor, and we did that in conjunction with Leanne Silman and the child nutrition program. Are there any questions?
I guess she explained it all tonight.
I have one question, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Sean?
On page 35, number 2, with the physical education and physical activity, it says, shall be essential element of each school's instructional program. The program will provide the opportunity for all students to develop the skills, da-da-da. The first bullet there talks about K-5, state requirement of 30 minutes each day per the NC Healthy Activity Children policy. I have gotten some calls in my community saying that they're concerned that their kindergartner and first grader are not getting enough physical activity at school. Are we sure we're meeting this 30 minutes at each school?
Yes, we should be. The only alters, in kindergarten especially, they should be getting quite a bit more than that.
Yeah.
But at K2, they have recess every day at the K-5 schools. Now, in 3-5, you'll hear them say they have recess on the days when they don't have PE.
Okay.
And so the schedules have showed that. So if you're getting those kind of calls, I'd be curious to see.
And do you know how long their recess is? Is that where the 30 minutes is?
Usually 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. The energizers and a lot of the classroom activities are built in to try to help us meet that mandate. And our district has done a lot of things to provide those resources for teachers. So, you know, if it's an inclement weather day and I don't get recess, then I may do some wiggling to music and cite my multiplication tables, and I'm being very uncreative here, but there are lots of activities like that that are provided, particularly as we get on into middle school where it gets more and more difficult.
It was about 5 years ago that the energizers,
Through our Health and Wellness Trust Fund Fit Together grant, we were able to supply energizers and an active recess manual and an active recess bag of equipment for all of our 437 K-5 classrooms in this county, and that was a tremendous boost to their ability to do more physical activity.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that we're getting that kind of inquiry. I mean, I'm really surprised, so I would like to know particulars kind of about that.
Okay.
Because we really do have a pretty healthy, active policy and procedure and expectation.
One thing I'd like to say, Mr. Chairman, if I could, in due in large part to what Ms. Olmsted just recently said, is by the work of Alice Keene and her work with community schools and so forth, and providing the resources for students. And she's a tireless advocate for our schools and healthy initiatives for our students. I appreciate your work in it here.
Mr. Richard, if I could just add to that, we are tremendously fortunate in our community to have strong partners with our health department, with our Brady School of Medicine, with our hospital foundation. Our partners have been tremendous over the years, and because of their support, we've been able to do things like place the equipment in our classrooms, provide energizers, build walking trails at 17 of our elementary schools. Without our community partners, that would have never been possible, and we're just blessed that they have recognized that in order to reach the most students in our community, public schools is the avenue for doing that. And so thank you, and thank you to our community partners for staying with us.
Any more questions? Thank you.
The other part of the meeting was just an update on the TQP partnership we have with ECU. Bill Frazier did an update for the EPS committee on where we are with that, and his meetings and stuff with Dr. Beecham is now in charge of the grant partnership at East Carolina. And so they're working on creating, today even, he created his school plans for the remainder of the year, and then what's going to happen at East Carolina for that. So there was an update on that. And then also I was pleased to introduce David Jenkins, my 912 testing and director, and also Sandra Jones, the K-8 person, was there. And so I introduced them to the committee too, so that was nice. Any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll do the Finance Committee, Benji and Michael.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I ask Michael to come forward to make our report. We have two main findings, requests, I guess, items that we discussed that day. Michael, I'm going to let you lead that discussion.
Good evening. The Finance Committee met on January 19th to review two primary items. First of all, a review of the 2010-11 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is a mouthful for saying the audit report, as well as Budget Amendment Number 1 for the 2011-12 fiscal year. Michael Jordan was in attendance from Pitt, Perry & Crone to present the outcome of the 2010-11 audit for Pitt County Schools. I'm proud to say that Pitt County Schools and the board received an unqualified audit opinion, which is the best audit opinion you can receive as a school system in any type of audit report. In addition, they found no situations of material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or any non-compliance with the board's financial operations. Pitt County Schools also received the Government Finance Officers Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting, as well as the Association of Schools Business Officials Excellence in Reporting Award as well, which actually marks the 10th year in a row that the school board has received these two very prestigious awards. So overall, the board should be proud of receiving a very outstanding audit report, which just is a representation of the expectations you have with financial reporting here at the school system. The Finance Committee then moved on to review Budget Amendment Number 1 for the 2011-12 fiscal year. As of that budget amendment, the budget stands at approximately $231.1 million, which represents an approximately $2 million increase from the budget resolution. The largest increase is coming with concerns to state funding, which increased approximately $1.9 million. The vast majority of that was the fact that we received the second half of our transportation allotment. We do not receive that until the month of December, till after the transportation study has been completed by the Department of Public Instruction. We also received additions in both our federal grants as well as special revenue grants, which reflects increases in both state and federal grant programs. A reconciliation of the changes in the budget compared to the budget resolution can be found on pages 44 of the budget of your board material. And unanimously, the committee reviewed both items and voted to approve both items at that meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I move that we approve the Budget Amendment Number 1 for 2011-2012.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think it'd be very appropriate at this time just to make a comment with one of our county commissioners here, how fortunate we are and the relationship that we continue, the positive relationship that we continue to develop with the county commission and their help and assistance and support in helping us to make these budgets look as good and as positive as they are. And I'd just like to thank Tom for representing the county commissioners here tonight and everybody else of the relationship that we have and the team building that we have together.
Any more discussion?
One thing I would like to say too also goes to Michael and his hard work and his conservative hands on that penny.
Very conservative.
Very conservative. And we really appreciate all, because those reports would not be what they are if it were if he didn't have his hands in it.
Absolutely.
Any more discussion? If not, let's vote. Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Benjamin. At this time, call on Sean and Aaron. Facilities Committee.
I'd like to invite Mr. Aaron Ballou up and update the board on the Facilities Committee meeting we had today, which did have a quorum present.
That was a great accomplishment. We did meet this evening at 5 p.m. We had 2 items that will require board action. One was the receiving of a recommendation that had been made by Francis Mills to name the road, the newly constructed road beside D.H. Conley that connects Worthington Road and Edwards Farm Road after her husband, Laverne Mills. That was made in the form of a motion to take to the county planning, which would then ultimately go to the county commissioners.
Yeah, would that not have to be approved by this board?
That's what I'm saying. It does, that was one of the things requested for action from the board.
I make a motion that we name that road that runs beside Conley after Laverne Mills.
Second.
We got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
So as I understand it, it will go to the planning board of the county?
Yes.
The county planning board?
Yes.
And at that point, they make the decision?
This is not the final level. They would have to make the final decision, even the commissioners.
Yeah, ultimately, I think the county commissioners make the final decision.
Commissioners make the final decision. This is just a recommendation.
Christine?
The school system purchased that land to make that connection between Worthington and Edwards Farm Road, and it is an access road for D.H. Conley. I can remember a couple years back, it was Route 13, and they named the street, and it would have been appropriate at that time if Worthington Road perhaps had been named after this gentleman who has no direct ties to D.H. Conley, although he has been, or he and his wife have always been very good neighbors to the school. The board has specific policies about naming schools after people who have given great service to the county, and I just don't see any merit in this suggestion.
Worth?
I would just like to say that these 2 individuals were there before the that road and that access was there, and they were also there before a lot of the updated has taken place to the facility. They have been very good neighbors to Pitt County schools. I mean, they have complained very little. I mean, you got to think about it. You've got 1,000 students running right beside your house every day, each and every day. And I just feel like that, number one, Laverne Mills is a very outstanding person in the community, and he's very well known out in that D.H. Conley community. And I just think it's something that would merit and honor him in years to come.
Sean?
Worth, your motion is actually not so much that we name the road, but that we recommend
to the planning board.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Anybody else? Any opposed?
Just for clarification, so in the event that we did not, the motion did not carry, what would happen then? What would the clarification be?
It would stay at its present name.
So.
These individuals could still take it to the planning.
Oh, yeah.
With
yeah,
or
they
without
can.
our blessing.
Without. For example, I had a road named after my grandfather. I just went straight to the commissioners, and they named it. That was years ago.
Is it a private road or is it a county road?
It's now overseen by the county and DOT. And the actual request, as it was provided in the facility committee agenda, actually shows that the initial request was made to the county planning. County planning has come back to the school board as far as their opinion and their recommendation back. But the initial request was made to the county planning department and to Eli Johnson.
But we don't make the final decision.
Any more discussion? If not, let's vote. All right, it passes. Got 4 noes and 7 yeses. Okay, Aaron.
The other action item that was recommended by the committee was to look at the name of the current committee structure and rename that, especially with the upcoming agendas and workload, to rename it from the Facility Committee to the Operational Committee of the Board of Education.
Mr. Chair, I'm making a motion that we rename the Facilities Committee for the Pitt County Board of Education, the Operations Committee for the Pitt County Board of Education.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Just clarification, Aaron said operational, and I think Sean just said operations. So which is it?
Which is it, Aaron?
Operations is what you said.
Operations Committee.
Operations.
Okay.
Are we clear on that? Did we, during the meeting earlier today, I thought we said operation. Operational.
I mean, that's fine.
That's what we're approving tonight, Operations Committee.
Operations
Yes.
is what you're really requesting.
Can you clarify that, please? It was operational?
It was operational.
I'll amend my motion, Mr. Chair.
But does that, I mean, operational is an adjective, is it not? And operations would be a
noun.
I'm not trying to be
I mean, I'm
picky,
fine.
but to me, operations is what you're.
Yes.
I'm fine.
I'm sticking with operations.
Sounds better.
Let's just leave facility services.
I got a motion.
Is operations.
Got a motion on the
Operation.
floor. Operations.
Okay.
And I got a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, would you repeat the motion, please?
Feel free to restate there.
Lord, help me get this right. I move we rename the Facilities Committee of the Pitt County Board of Education to the Operations Committee with the Pitt County Board of Education.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, vote.
That's right. Benji, you got to confirm.
Not again.
You got to vote. Yeah, confirm. There you go.
Okay.
The last item was the committee did not deal with any other renaming issues, but actually saw and was presented a demonstration of a GPS tracking solution of bus ridership from Everyday Solutions.
He said that they would do a third of it.
Just for information purposes.
That it?
That's it.
Thank you.
And,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a couple questions for Aaron. Couldn't ask them earlier. On the bus equipment, there was a lot of discussion about how many complaints we field every day from parents about bus problems. Can you give a sense of the scope of that problem?
Again, we transport about 12,500 kids on a morning and a little larger number on an afternoon basis, but I think the schools would give you some justification. We don't have this financially or statistically proven, but a large number of concerns come up both morning and afternoons, inclement weather days, a number of the different things that relate to transportation.
Okay, on that project, are you going to, I know it's going to be tied up with the budget decision, but are you going to get information from the company about the possibility and the cost of a pilot project?
Yes, that was asked to them after the meeting to see what options we had as far as a smaller version of what was presented tonight.
Okay, and then on the athletic equity study that I think you're going to carry out over the next couple of months, are you going to, is your goal to just
look at middle schools and high schools in the reality that we have right now, or is there going to be a further step that sort of establishes standards for middle schools and high schools in the county?
We will probably use our newest construction, which is up to the standards of DPI for both our middle schools and high schools, and compare that to our other current schools across the district.
Okay, so that'll be the gold standard, sort of. When we do consider that study in a couple of months, is there a way for us to also have information about the academic, you referenced science labs and VOCAT's equipment. Is there a way to have that sort of presented at the same time as so that we have both, we have a picture of the needs academically also as compared to athletically?
All that is possible. Within what time frame at this immediate point, I do not know until I can seek the scope of those projects out, seek some assistance and some cooperation from some other people within the organization. But within the scope, probably not within 30 to 60 days to relay all of those. Those were a number of things that were presented back in the 2003 long-range facility plan, which you may recall, which was done by Smith Senate,
right,
which was a separate and outside report. They did encompass a lot of those, but again, we can see what we can do to update and bring you back a revised timeline.
Just a rough idea of, that'd be great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Worth?
I did ask the gentleman, would he consider breaking up that total figure that we talked about, of the price that it would cost, and he would break it up into thirds. And then the profit that we made, for example, the first quarter of the year, we could apply to those profits. We could apply to the second price or third amount, so that we wouldn't have one big price item that we would have to fund at one time. So he said he was willing to break it up into thirds.
So we could phase it in.
Phase it in.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, that was a quick discussion too. I would suggest that, Aaron, you might be able to go back to him and to see if you can work out something even more intensive than that.
Will do.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Aaron. This time I call on Rob and Worth for the policy committee report.
I had to bring my glasses for these. We've got about 10 policies.
Yes.
And 9 of them will be for first reading. Our first one is a new policy, and it's dealing with service animals in the schools. And I don't know that we've had to deal with that as of this time, but yet it is forthcoming that there may be an individual with a disability, for example, that we may need a CNI dog
or otherwise.
That could happen. That's happened in some other counties, and even other animals other than just a dog. Yes, where the individual needed assistance. So it was, we had a long discussion about this, and it was thought that we needed a policy that we would be able to address it, and we would be proactive rather than reactive.
Yes.
And may I ask what other animals?
A miniature, I hate to even
I'm
say
curious. Do I bring my goat or something?
miniature horse,
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
dealing with balance
Oh,
for a child. And of course, all of that would go before committee, making sure that it was needed and everything was proper. And that has happened in other states. That is an example. That's a real life example. So that's for first reading. Any other questions?
On the first page of this policy, with it being first reading, on the first sentence under A service animal for purposes of this policy normally is any dog that has been individually trained to work, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes to a physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or other mental disability. And I'm asking here, and I'm not sure if anyone would be familiar, and we might have to come back to this in the future, but what type of psychiatric disorders would require an animal?
Kathy?
I may have to ask
I'm
Ms.
not
Keeter if
familiar
she
with
might have
any.
some light on that. Has some light on that.
The other ones I get, but the psychiatric one,
I'm not an expert in all of the areas of disability, but examples that might be used would be for people who have security issues. It could also be used for within the DSM-4 spectrum, such as autism, for those areas. Runners. It's expanded far beyond what the traditional role has been, such as a CNI dog.
I would just like to throw caution to the board about keeping the term psychiatric in there in this day and age, because so many things in the psychiatric field are stretched nowadays. I fear that could end up with, my child has reactive attachment disorder and cannot be separated from Fido, and absolutely has, yeah. And, and in this day and age where so much of our psychiatric community is experimental, or hey, this is the latest, I would hate for us to, looking risk management, to introduce animals into our school system under psychiatric. The other things I just would like to throw caution as this is first reading.
Rob, as school board attorney, how do you, based on your input in putting this policy together, feel about that and our legalities?
Well, this one, this policy you have in front of you is predominantly from the model from the North Carolina School Boards Association, with the exception of word I've added a few places normally, because we've also mentioned earlier that at times it may be something other than a dog. I mean, the procedures and the guidelines and the possibilities listed here, that's what have been recommended to us in our policies that we have by the School Board Association and others. I mean, these are some tough issues, but we have a process in here to evaluate requests, look at when they're not appropriate, look at when they're required by, I guess, their IEP, and see if they're proper. I'm okay. I recommend it as it is right now. I mean, there may be lessons we're going to learn as we go through this, but for now, I recommend it as it is.
My question to follow up is to Kathy. Would not mental disability cover a psyche? I mean, the issue here is that I have to have an identified disability.
Correct.
We are not violating the law to say a student who does not have an identified disability can't just show up with whatever disorder and need their parakeet. That I have to have, and I'm not making a lot, I'm just saying, in order to qualify for a service animal, would I not have to have an identified disability?
Yes.
And so wouldn't the word other mental disability cover somebody who had a psychiatric situation that was such that it created a disability for them? And I know I'm putting you on the spot. We don't have to answer the question, and I'm just saying to the concern that's raised, it would be, to me, looks like that would.
And I do raise my concern just for future discussion, not for anything that we have to decide here
The
tonight.
point you made is a very valid point, because we do have children who present with RADs. However, that is not the disability category that they're served under. So, other health impaired,
That's what I was going to say, other health impaired.
Serious emotional disability at times, depending on the individual child and their unique needs.
The other comment that I would have is on page 58. And I guess this is a question, because I really don't know a whole lot about service animals in public school setting, period. But looking at the top of the page, D, a service animal must be housebroken under the control of its handler and receive all necessary vaccination as required. I'm just wondering, I don't really even know how to ask this, but at some point during the day, this animal has to use the bathroom.
Wow.
So I don't know if we need to look at that in our policy. How would that
They're
be
wearing
handled?
diapers, or either they are trained, house trained.
How we've
Either way, that's how that works.
But I mean, at some point, they got to You're going to have to go outside during a 6-hour school day at some point. Where do we take them? Do we take them in the yard or outside the fence? Just something to think about on this. I mean, this is new ground.
Yeah.
That's a comment, I guess, more than a question.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't know.
All we're doing is going by a recommendation
exactly.
of state.
That looks good. It just got me to thinking.
Right.
And Sean, they're very good questions. We obviously don't have them all tonight,
Right.
but they're things that we need to look at.
Yeah.
And there are different levels within our system that we have in place that does not automatically mean that just because an individual shows up with whatever, that it's going to enter our school building.
Sure.
There are procedures in place. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Next policy is policy 4.103. Is that right?
Correct, on page 60 of your book.
And this was dealing with crowd control at school-sponsored activities. And this is looking at adjusting the current policy that we just put in place. Does anyone have any concerns regarding policy 4.103, the way it is worded? Because what we're doing is we're adjusting a policy that we just passed recently. No. This is just first reading. Any
Just first reading, no action needed.
Okay, go to policies 7.005, dealing with professional development. And this is just a wording issue within this policy, making sure that at the beginning we went with professional development, so the next sentence also includes professional development. That's just a wording issue. See, 7.014, conflict of interest. If you turn to page,
It starts on 65, the one proposed change is, it starts in 62, the one proposed change is on 65 of your book. You see highlighted under number B at the top of page 65 of your book.
basically this policy is to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest, that an individual teacher that cannot recruit, so to speak, from the school as a result of their position. They can go through community schools and still conduct that activity, but it would just go through community schools rather than the school system.
Jill?
I know this isn't why this policy has come up right now, but it did strike me, if you look on page 68, at the bottom, 7B, it's the procedure for suspected board member violations, and it's the same wording in this policy as it is in our Code of Ethics. And I would just make the observation that this has caused all of us a lot of difficulty over the last couple months, and perhaps the policy committee might want to look at clarifying the language in that portion of the policy so that future boards won't have that question and issue to deal with.
Put that on.
I'll put that on the agenda.
Also, I would like to ask you this question. This policy would also cover an individual or teacher, for example, that took something that they made to school. Would this policy cover? I was asked that they are selling, and they set it up in the in some room, and they're selling this item, and they're having the teachers come in and look at it and purchase it from them. Does this policy say that they cannot do that?
It covers that activity, but I'd have to look at it.
Because
more
it
and get back to you.
is happening in our schools
Yes.
now.
But I'd have to review it and look at the section. But yes, it possibly does cover that.
Because the person who has mentioned something to me regarding the reason why we started this policy mentioned that that was happening in schools. Wouldn't that be the same thing? The teacher would be using their position to create an audience to where they would be able to sell their item. I just
Yes.
am bringing that up for you to look at
I
at a
will look
later
at it.
date.
I can't cite for verbatim, but it talks even in general about employees not putting himself in a position of possible conflict of interest. But let me look at that further and get back with you.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Mayor. Go
Okay,
ahead, Mayor.
for example, okay, that's why I have a difficult time with policy stuff. Okay, for example, Mary Kay or Jujubes
That's what I'm
or
talking about.
M&M's.
Yes.
As long as the teacher is not selling it to the students, or she's selling it to employees, does that have anything to do with it?
Well,
Is that a violation? You see what I'm saying? What is the consequences for if I have a jewelry, if I'm selling jewelry, if I have Avon book or Mary Kay or what have you?
It's like I said, I'm not prepared every line by line to go over this tonight, but I'll tell you there's portions that talk general about not putting yourself in a conflict of interest. I guess in their relation with another employee, let's say they were a supervisor, they had somebody working below them, they were attempting to sell that item to them, it could possibly be a conflict. I'd like to look at it further, as I suggested to Mr. Forbes, and get back to the board if that's possible.
It's right here.
Yeah.
It's in, but it's
What
in,
page? Okay, yeah.
it's in letter B.
It's in letter B?
It says,
Oh, is
any
it?
board member, administrator,
Yeah.
or any employee shall not for personal gain solicit or sell or have any pecuniary
Yeah.
interest in the sale of goods, wares, merchandise, materials, supplies, equipment, or services to students or employees of this school
Yeah.
system at school or on school purposes, unless it goes through community
Yeah.
schools.
What page
And
is that?
and that's actually page 65. Michael's right. Page 65 at the top, B. You see, it talks about any board member or employee shall not basically sell in the school grounds.
And I think that needs to be discussed at the next principals meeting, because I had someone call as a result of that, and I said I would bring it up.
Mr.
And
Chair.
we continue to do that, and I think it's a good thing it's being brought up.
Yeah.
As we've talked about this issue, we have more things come up and people say, gosh, so I don't think people are intentionally trying to do
No.
harm, but
No.
I think understanding, and I think the other issue is the difference between fundraisers. I mean, we really may want to talk about the difference between fundraisers and selling.
Yes.
It's different if
If it's a
it's Girl
fundraiser.
Scout cookies
Oh,
Right.
you get it.
versus I'm putting that money, I'm selling my jewelry or my jujubes and putting that money in my pocket.
Correct.
I would agree with Dr. Emery, there is a difference with that.
And that was one of the things I was going to say, because I had heard staff had been specifically told that selling of goods at one of the meetings was, as far as Girl Scout cookies, was not allowed on campus. And I think we can get to be a little bit too literal in some of our policies.
We're going too far
Yeah.
on that. That's not for personal
Right.
gain.
I'm not sure that's
It's
not
not
personal.
personal gain is the issue.
I mean, I think the only thing, again, is the potentiality is where, like, say you had forgive me, if you had a supervisor who was
All right,
possibly
next-
considered pressuring
Yeah.
somebody working for them.
Next, policy 7.107, just dealing with wording. Any questions on that? Then we have policy 7.110, and changes for that begin on what page?
Looking real quick.
7-1.
Is it 78?
77, I see.
77.
I see a highlight. The changes that I've made are always in highlight or in, so if you see bold, that's change. The one I see right now, page 77.
Did this and the next couple of policies come through the HR committee?
Correct. If you look at the, basically, E through I,
They came through human resources.
E through I came through Human Resources. They're all just recommended changes from the Human Resources Committee.
Policy 7.111. Evaluation of certified employees, and Delilah, you might want to speak to this. I mean, this was really helping some of our staff when they find out that they don't have to be as detailed with certain individuals, that they can do a modified version
Correct.
of the evaluation?
We were charged with the process of determining if we were going to do a full evaluation on every single staff member in every school, or we decided that we would have an abbreviated version for those that are in career status already and were not having any difficulty, that they would be evaluated on standards 1 and 4 and also standard 6 when that is put into implementation. And that's the changes to this. And also adding for number 9, that we expand that to put evaluation system guidelines as well, so that the summative evaluation would be in concurrence and accordance with all of those.
And I think this is extremely needed in our schools to help.
Was that going to
Okay.
State requirement, too.
Yes.
Mary?
Just one question pertaining to this one. Right underneath that where it said the principals have the authority to conduct more than the minimum number of observations.
Correct.
The minimum number is what, and the max will be?
The minimum number for a career teacher that has already obtained tenure status would be 2. Okay. For a probationary teacher, which is someone who has not earned tenure, the minimum is 4. Okay. And one of them includes an observation by their peer.
What about the time element?
Time element is 20 minutes for informal, 45 for
the formal. Okay.
Any more questions?
Okay. Policy 7.120. Teacher planning. And this is wording again. Any questions on that? All right, 7.121. Extracurricular and non-curricular duties. Really, we're looking at BTs because they're called beginning teachers now. So that's changes. That's all that is just a change in lettering. Policy 10.111. Student transfers on page 87. Rob, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yes, there's a few changes that the policy committee looked at and are recommending to the whole board. Actually, the first one's page 86. It's a small one. It's the removal of the line. You'll see application of the 1% rule to homeschool. The two major recommended changes deal with on page 87 and also on 89. Those are the major changes. Basically is that the policy committee discussed limiting the majority of the transfer applications with some exceptions to the period of April through July. Except in certain extenuating circumstances, you'll see discussed and further on page 89 under Roman numeral 2, procedure for requesting transfer. You'll see talking about period of April 1st to July 1st, except unless there's unanticipated or significant unanticipated events or significant change in the student's status which occurs after July 1 that may warrant special consideration of that request at that time. Additionally, you'll see on number 6 at the bottom that the transfer panel will make a recommendation to the whole board. Well, then the whole board will vote on that in closed session due to student privacy issues. And that's the major changes to that policy that have been proposed. And this is for first reading, no vote requirement this time.
I have a question. Is on page 87G, is that identifying certain hardship cases, or are those pretty cut and dry?
I'll have to look at it further. It wasn't an area we were discussing.
Okay, I'm sorry, that falls only, okay. Oh, okay, let me rephrase the question. Transfer applications due to hardship,
Yes.
and mentioned in C, but we make no effort to identify what is a hardship until you get down to C, which is custodial.
You mean G?
G.
G, yes. Thank you.
Well, I think, and correct, Mr. Forbes?
Well, basically, when the committee met, we just could not come up with specific, we couldn't name every single hardship that would come up. And we just felt like the committee would have to make a recommendation, and then from that point, that recommendation would go to the full board, and the full board would make a decision on whether that is a hardship that they want to consider. It wouldn't be left up to just 3 individuals or the hearing panel.
Excuse me.
It just, having served on that, there was never anything definitive, and I didn't feel like we were even deciding cases based on hardship. And if that's going to be in the policy, we need to come to grips with perhaps a little tighter what is hardship.
Yes.
And it's easier to determine that in the committee than it is when it comes back to the whole board.
And even when it comes to the full board, we need criteria for just, for identifying what hardship means. I mean, because we could sit there for hours, because everybody's idea of hardship will certainly play into the final decision, won't it?
And Rob, you did check with several counties.
Yes.
And with the
there was no.
There was no.
People have a tough time, I think, out there, even when we discuss this at the committee, agreeing on the
The North Carolina
definition.
School Board Association even mentioned that you better be careful when you start listing specific hardships. That was their recommendation.
Yeah.
But, and I think that was the purpose of having the subcommittee.
Right.
Was to determine each case individually, then submit it back. So I don't see where that should change.
I guess what I'm asking is that those transfers need to be judged based on hardship. If you've got to determine hardship. And in most cases, I think we were trying to be nice guys and, helping people out. It wasn't a hardship at all. But, okay.
But I think after the panel hears from the parents of that student, they are going to bring to the full board their recommendation.
Come with more than what the parents say.
Then I think we need some language that says that, because if you look at
Okay.
89, I'm just interpreting this, it looks like if you apply for a transfer after the time period, late transfer applications, those submitted after July 1, will be considered only if extenuating circumstances exist. Who is going to decide it's an extenuating circumstance for the panel to consider it? And it may be that the panel is going to decide if it's an extenuating circumstance, but that's not what this says.
Right.
This makes it sound like somebody's going to sit in the extenuating circumstance office and say, this isn't, and then the panel will.
Okay.
And I just think whatever you want is what we need to clarify here. If it is that those are all applications that come in after the timeline going to be heard by the panel, because then you're going to hear probably more than you do now, because we have somebody who's sort of a governor
Oh, yeah.
in that student registration office who's initially denying them based on our policy, and then they have the right to appeal to the panel.
Right.
So I just think we need some language that is a little more specific here.
Okay.
Mayor.
Oh, well, I guess, Dr. Emery, I guess you did go towards that area. But before they even come to the transfer subcommittee, that would be already determined with case group before it gets to us.
Not if there's extenuating circumstances.
After the certain date.
But I think it's usually the circumstances that the panel cannot agree on. The panel cannot give it because of the policy. And it's a circumstance that's not one that's written in the policy.
I guess the only point I'm trying to make, let me make it a different way. There's no point in having a time frame that you have to submit applications
Yes.
if then everybody who submits after that is considered a hardship.
Well,
Does
then
that
we
make
just
any
need to
sense?
get rid of the time frame.
And if you, I'm not advocating getting rid of having a deadline. I'm just saying, if there's not some mechanism after the time period for determining who comes before the panel and who doesn't.
Could it not just say board committee shall be the determining factor in that? I mean, they're doing that now. Why not just put it in the language if it sounds like we need to have that put in there? I think that's the intention of the committee, is to be the deciding factor of what a hardship is.
I think you need to carry that back to the drawing board.
All right.
Okay.
That's it. Good point.
Okay, then we come to policy 7.024, and Delilah, this is one that really needs to be a policy that we need to skip the first reading and have in place this month so that we will be in compliance, correct, with the state.
There's a grant application
Right.
that's pending on it.
So I move to temporarily suspend bylaw 1.112 policy development, which normally requires 2 readings of a policy recommendation before board action.
Second.
For the board to consider and act on the current policy recommendations regarding the proposed new policy 7.024, Pitt County Schools staff wellness policy in one read.
Second. I'll give you a short form.
Okay.
I got a motion on the floor, second. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote.
Make sure this thing works this time.
Come on.
Put it down, Mark. Put it on the table.
Don't give up, Mark.
There you go.
I think I can vote. I think I can.
You gotta vote first before you confirm.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Work.
That's it.
Short form works good.
Don't they need to take
Okay.
action?
Now, since we voted on that, I move that we adopt policy 7.024, which is our wellness policy for the adults.
Correct. And if you feel you require more information, actually, Alice King and Rita Roy, who talked about the procedure for students, can provide more light on this if asked, needed by the board.
I got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
The staff wellness policy.
Yes.
If not, let's vote.
It's so tough about it.
Okay. That it work?
That's it.
Okay, at this time, I call change of sports season, middle of school athletics. Ron Butler.
Thank you. We've got also with us, if you have any questions, Chris Gaddy is back, who is the athletic director and volleyball coach at Aycock and the softball coach at Rose. And then Brian Tripp, are you here to answer questions too, Brian, or are you just here to watch? He's a football coach. He's a paid football coach at Aycock, but I've seen him on several high school sidelines as well. And but I appreciate you looking at this, and I also want to say thank you to Mr. Nichols and Mr. Pollard, because the only thing I've wanted this to be an upfront discussion. Everybody gets, all the ideas out and look at it, and then we'll move from there. I've had many conversations with Walt Pollard. His wife will be excited once this is done, so maybe we can just enjoy lunch, and she won't hear Walt and I debate this. We go back 35 years. Mr. Nichols was very kind and called me, and a lot of the issues we discussed, and some of these we kind of agree to disagree. Well, the first thing I'm going to agree with both of them is that in February, it's not a good time to play anything outside North Carolina. It's not. But given a choice, I'd rather be playing baseball, I mean, I'd rather play football in the cold than baseball in the cold. You know, there's a reason, you know, as Walt mentioned, they played a game just outside of Boston yesterday, a football game. They would have never played a baseball game. Professional baseball, they go to warm climate for their spring training for a reason. But I will agree, it's not a good time, but one of our seasons, an outside season, will start in the beginning of February, whether it is baseball, softball, or football. One of them will go outside, as well as soccer. Couple questions that, you know, and I'll just list down that Walt mentioned. Being close, you play football in the spring and then you'll turn around and play in the fall. You know, the latest we ever get through is about mid-April. So you've got about a 3.5 month period before you would do that. And the nice thing about the High School Athletic Association rules, after that, in the offseason, you're not allowed any physical contact. So if there are any injuries, you do have a 3.5 month period back there. Mr. Nichols brought up one great point. He talked about the DPI handbook. Now, I'm on the committee that has written the new DPI handbook that comes effective next year. And the part where it says that football will be played in the fall, that is true for this year. And I use that, and Chris knows, for 2 years when they said, why can't we do that? And I said, because the handbook says you can't do it. And then finally they came up and said, well, why? I said, I don't know, but the handbook says that. And they said, can you ask? So I said, okay. So at the next meeting I went there and I asked, and Tim Brayboy, which you mentioned, was one we called. He was on the original committee that wrote the first handbook. And Tim was one we called and said, why does it say that we have to play football in the fall? And no one could give an answer. Well, Les, who is new at DPI, his predecessor was named Dow. Dow said, well, why would you want to play football in the spring? I said, for me personally, there's a lot of convenience. There's some officiating issues. But for me personally, I can get athletic trainers to football games in the spring and not in the fall. And immediately he looked at me and said, it will be removed next year. I said, why? He said, we will not be the group that gets in the way of having athletic trainers at a football game. So this year, and I've got the draft in my office. This year, DPI does not state that football must be played in the fall. However, the state is concerned that if there's a shift and it goes gradually, some schools may be left out without enough people to play. That's their concern of having everybody play at the same time, so everybody has enough people to play. And we go back to, once again, we're the proper size where we get to play each other and have a full season. Most counties could never do that. And if you look at, our neighbor, your Edgecombe, Martin, Greene County, they could never switch their seasons unless they had people to play. So that's the biggest reason. Now, as far as weather, I agree with what they said. February has an average high of 54. August has an average high of 88. The one thing that was surprising to me, and he mentioned rain, February in Greenville averages 3.8 inches of rain, and August is our rainiest month at 6.3 inches. I don't know which is better, whether if I'm going to be on the ground, whether it's football or baseball, but I'm just looking at that choice. We have had in our athletic trainers, which that program still goes great. In the last 2 years, we've had 43 heat-related illnesses. Now, that could be just dehydrated. That could be lightheaded, worried about heat stroke. They're grouped together. 43 of them, and 4 of them were in the spring. 39 of them were in the fall. So that, one of the reasons we look at football is for heat-related issues. So with that, the simple thing for me is, like I said, I'm a traditionalist. I've said no for now 2.5 years, but I kept coming up with good reasons to switch and not good reasons not. Other than it just doesn't seem right. And Walt's a traditionalist too. I mean, and I agree with that. It would be strange, but I think it would be safer. And if you have any questions, whether Chris or Brian would like to answer them. Yes, sir.
I do. Is this time for comments now?
I need comments or a motion.
Well, I make a motion that we do not change the way our athletic is handled at the middle school now.
I got a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I got a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Jennifer.
Go ahead. You were in comment. Go ahead.
I was just thinking regarding the football fields, I think there's going to be more of a maintenance upkeep on the football field than there would be the baseball. I mean, in that grass and that sogginess and so forth. Another issue that I also thought about, which was brought up, I think, was the clothing issue with the wetness and dampness. The potential for injury if during the time of 8th grade and 9th grade, there's not going to be many months or weeks for those students to heal from injuries that they may encounter when they're in the 8th grade. Also, I'm concerned about the fast track students. They would not be eligible to play a sport, would they?
When you are fast tracked, you're eligible that first semester. Now, the issue we run into now, like right now, if someone is fast tracked in basketball, we allow them to finish that year in the middle school, but they can't go to the high school.
Right.
Now their season's long enough because you can't have 2 seasons in the same year. So if someone's fast tracked and they're playing basketball, they can't play basketball at the high school this year.
Okay.
However, they could play a spring sport. Now, if someone played baseball in the spring and then they're fast tracked, they could not play baseball or softball that spring.
And my last comment is I just believe students would have to choose between certain sports, whereas they wouldn't be able to play in as many sports as they could now.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment.
Jennifer.
I'm kind of like Ron. I've been really back and forth about, and I didn't hear much about this at all in the beginning, and from any parents or anything like that. Now that we've given it some time, I've definitely been approached more. I've had more constituents come to me or call me or email me or whatever in opposition. I haven't had one parent come to me with support, and that usually happens. So, and these are the concerns that have been brought up just for purposes of discussion or answering the questions or whatever. And mainly it's the main thing that's come up is all the things that Worth just mentioned, so I won't repeat those, but travel ball. And that, yes, I'm here to represent Pitt County schools and the athletics of Pitt County schools, but let's face it, we are in a day and age where travel ball is more prevalent in homes now with kids with playing sports. So my problem with that is that, sure, those people are making those decisions to play travel ball, and they are playing year-round in most sports, but the point is they are making those choices, and they may not play as much middle school sports for 2 years. They don't want to sacrifice their position on a travel ball team to play middle school sports for a couple of years, so therefore maybe the activity or maybe the participation would go down in our middle schools because of that. I don't know if that's been brought up or if it's been discussed or what.
There has been a lot of discussion. I don't know if Chris, if you, because I mean, you know, he has to live it. Now, first of all, I realize if they're out there freezing a football coach in February, I'm not going to be with them. I'll wait and observe on a nice day. But so they have to live it. So if he wants to answer that, travel ball. If we look at athletics, and if we're not careful, I mentioned earlier about Charlotte Mecklenburg, and I do want to correct one thing. They canceled their middle school athletics. And then a private organization came in, and well, they had some rich people in Charlotte by the name of the name was mentioned, Jordan and Hendrick and people like that wrote huge checks to finance it. So they're not putting any funds in their middle school, and it's a 1-year trial. We are coming close to where, especially middle school athletics, may become insignificant. Right. Now, it wasn't that long ago when you played sports, your middle school or your high school team was the most important team you were on. It meant more to you than anything else.
I agree.
That's changing.
It is.
You know, we have people choosing, you know, a lot of different leagues. So, I mean, that's just the way the times are changing. And, that, you know, that we're headed that way anyway. You know, now as far
but
as...
it's just going to make it worse, I guess,
right.
was the comments that I've gotten, that if we're going to, as my husband put it, turn over the apple cart for a few apples here to, you know, is it really affecting the whole cart? And yes, it would, in my opinion. So it's, yeah, I'm in a different place with it. I mean, I've heard, to me, logically, the athletic trainer availability and umpires and stuff like that takes huge priority over a lot of these other reasons. And yes, I'd feel comfortable supporting it for that reason alone. But it's you know, again, I support constituents of District 5, and they've brought concerns to me, and so I feel like I should support their wishes. So, and I'm saying, and I'm telling you, their wishes are not to change this. So.
I'd already asked Mary if it's all right, I'll go ahead and make my one little point. Rain in February is different than rain in July and August, simply because of evaporation purposes. In other words, 2 inches of rain in February and you can have a mud puddle on your football field. And when you've got students that are participating in a sport that have to get right down in the mud, so to speak, it's a lot different than practicing baseball, that most of the time, at the very least, in February, they're standing up. They're not laying down on the ground or tackling somebody on the ground. If they are, we have got problems. And so I would suggest to you that a safety issue might be just as important about the health and concern of those kids that have to practice in the cold weather, laying on the ground, and having to be part of something that tends to mean that kids are going to be on the ground when they're tackled and things, as far as health.
Well, I've had, excuse me, I've had several parents to contact me concerning the fact that what you were saying about Charlotte Mecklenburg and their middle schools, possible elimination of their public organized sports in public schools as opposed to pay to play, or possibly it turning into something as an intramural sport and the kids don't get the same opportunities as they would in a regular, because a lot of times with intramural is volunteer, is one thing or the other. But more than anything, they're afraid of the pay to play, with the prospects of them having to pay that. You have some, like Jennifer was saying, they have the travel ball and they can afford to join these softball leagues and soccer leagues. And kids in my district, it's not getting ready to happen because of the distance in which it costs them just to travel from the north side to those organized sports areas. The other thing was, when you spoke about it before, I was really looking at the aspect of the trainers. You kept saying it wasn't necessarily the referees or the umpires, it was the trainers that you were saying that we would possibly be able to get at the games, and everything. But I think that if that is the case, I would much rather have an EMT than have a trainer. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of our people that are parents who are the EMTs, rescue squad people, those kind of people wouldn't mind volunteering if they were called upon.
Actually,
I've
called them and I've asked that question. And they said they would be willing to come and try to be as many games as possible. Now, realize an athletic trainer is designed to diagnose injuries. Now, do we want our athletic trainers doing tracheotomies and all? No. But they're there to diagnose. Now, we did a training with our high schools that every group got together, and little things you wouldn't think about is, if the athletic trainer's out there with the team doctor, when do you signal and how do you signal? I mean, this is our signal in Pitt County. If you see the athletic trainer do this, that means they're calling the response team. They won't want them to come out and help. But they would be willing to help. But if they're at the game and they get a call, they have to leave.
Yeah.
Now,
but I just think
would we
that's
like
just,
both?
But
yes.
I still think that's just something logistic, that we can work out if it came to that point. And the other thing, he was talking about the weather. It snows here. I think in North Carolina, it is the coldest in March to me. It's all other months of the years of the month. March is the coldest in North Carolina, as opposed to the rest of the winter months, whichever. Well, I mean, they're running so close now, we can barely tell the difference. But and that was another thing with injuries. Like I said, I watched the games yesterday, and it was raining in San Francisco, and and the slipping and the falling and the possible injuries. You just don't want to take that chance. But and I'm swayed from where I was before, than I am now, because like I said, the most concern that I had, Ron, was the fact that parents are afraid that they're going to be forced with that extra cost of paying to play and having to be forced into organized sports and, you know, things that are not just free for their children. So.
Well, the pay to play will be up to you.
I know that, but I'm just saying
I'm against
but
it.
I mean, yeah, but
I
mean,
do
if
watch
it comes
Charlotte
to
Mecklenburg. They're not funding middle school, but they're still charging $50 per season.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, isn't that great? They're using none of their money for it, but yet they're still collecting money on pay to play. I
Yeah.
thought that's an interesting situation.
I mean, those are just some of my concerns, Mr. Chairman. I mean,
Thank you. Jill?
Couple questions, Ron. You sent us a survey.
The surveys that were anonymous, they went to all the high school and middle school athletic directors. Yes.
High school and middle school.
Yes.
So you got, I think it's 13 responses, which out of
Correct.
how many?
Well, we've got 6 high school and 13 middle school. Well, actually, it went out to 12 middle school.
So you sent to the head coaches?
No, just the athletic
The
directors.
athletic directors, okay. And this was 7-6, I mean, if you just look at the yeses and the nos. Is that sort of your sense of the group?
I think a lot of people thought it was a done deal, and we're getting more responses for people that didn't. But now some of them they were up front, you know, they said, well, I'm not really for it. It's not a big deal to me, but I'm not really for it. But no, actually, the numbers surprised me that many people, because that's not what I'm hearing when I'm in meetings. Because, you know, this was not something I thought up. And for me, this would never be good, because if we flipped and as soon as somebody got cold watching a football game in February, they're going to be talking about me. You know, if we don't change, nothing happens. But my bottom line is, I think it's safer for our student athletes. You know, we talked about whether, you know, I'd much rather Walt come hit me in the mud than somebody hit a 100-mile-an-hour baseball at me in the mud and it's bouncing. You know, I mean, just from a standpoint of safety. But
Okay, so what but you're saying what you've heard in meetings, this doesn't quite reflect
well,
what you...
and of course Chris is here, and he was kind of elected by the middle school athletic director to be their spokesman. And then, like I said, most of them wanted to be here, but we had middle school basketball games today. Most of them are probably driving buses home as we speak now.
I have a couple more questions,
Sure.
just for clarification. You said that the football in the fall rule was going to be waived, and you had the draft there.
Yes.
Are we absolutely sure that that's
We're
gonna-
certain it is not in.
No
It is
question.
not in the handbook for the 2012,
It doesn't
2013.
have to
It
still
does
be
not have it in
approved
there.
by somebody,
No.
or, you said that the high proportion of heat-related problems are in the fall. Is that just mostly with football? I mean, or,
I don't know. I mean, we have issues in soccer,
can't
but a lot
track
of it's football, and a lot of concern in middle school football is they're not in shape. A lot of your high schools, they work out all summer. Your middle schools, some of them don't do as the workouts that others do. And then kids come in and they've been playing, video games all summer, and all of a sudden they're out there, and it's one of those hot days of 96 degrees and 95% humidity. And
last question is, I mean, I know, you told us how this came about, that you just kept hearing it from the ADs. Is there anywhere else in North Carolina that has done this flip yet?
Chris, do you know?
In Wilmington, they do have softball, which is in August, in middle schools. But with the state DPI before, would not allow football to be able to change. until
Right,
this
so
year
nobody
coming up.
could- right.
So no one could do it before anyways. There are some other states that they have switched a few seasons here and there. I don't know whether it was good or bad, you know what I mean? I don't know their opinions on it.
So this is sort of uncharted territory.
It's very uncharted. And we're one of the few people that we're the right size that we can play with it. Most people
Because
can't
we're
do that.
self-sufficient.
Because we're self-contained in the size of our schools. I mean, you're allowed 7 football games, and we have 8 teams, so it's perfect.
Once we start down this path, if we did start down this path, and after a year we found unexpected difficulties, how horrendous would it be to switch back?
I don't think it would be any. Other than somebody like right now, if you said, okay, we're going to switch, somebody is going to play baseball,
It's that,
starting in a
double
couple
up
weeks, and they're going to have it in the summer, then they're going to play it in the fall. But so, when you switch, you do bundle things up that you'd want them to know ahead of time. But no, I mean, actually, what they're looking for is just a trial, just to see, everybody's putting out the advantages that would be there, and if we try it and it doesn't work, we switch back. It's not in stone.
John?
Right. She done.
I just wanted a clarification on the traveling thing. So what you're saying is baseball gets switched to the fall. There are families that would choose to play travel ball,
Yeah.
and you can't do both.
Correct. Well, it'd be tough.
You end up paying $145
Yes, one no.
on baseball.
Well, it depends. I mean,
One of the things we
I mean,
look at
my
with
kids
with
play
travel
soccer, and
ball,
I mean,
and it's hard for us to plan around travel ball. But one of the things we look at now, when they play baseball in the spring, there's a lot of travel ball. And one of the reasons we looked at years ago trying to push our spring season back, but a lot of them thought, well, no, then we were in conflict with the baseball leagues as they start up. And in baseball, you've got to be concerned of, you know, if you're looking to pitch that guy on a Tuesday, how much did he pitch over the weekend?
sure.
You know, I'd much, if he
That was
played tight
mentioned
end, it
here.
doesn't matter how many innings he pitched. So many of our athletes, you know, now we do have, and as Mr. Forbes said, there's a lot of athletes that are really concentrating on one sport. And I really hate to see it, especially in the middle school. I can understand in high school, but in the middle school, I'd like to see our student athletes trying new sports and playing other sports. So, I mean, my hope would be that somebody that normally would do like travel volleyball in the spring, maybe they'll try softball in the fall since they can play volleyball in the spring. But we don't know that. That's one of the reasons if we had a trial, we would know these things.
That's not fair to afford. I was just saying it would eliminate a lot of kids if you did that, if we did this. I mean,
But anytime
baseball.
we play a sport, and a lot of the people we're talking about, they're playing almost year round. And they're playing year round. It doesn't matter what time you do their season. You also look at it, in my generation, you know, it was your golf and tennis were elitist sports. In today's game, if you look at East Carolina's rosters, baseball, softball, and volleyball are more elitist than golf and tennis. If you look at East Carolina's roster and you look at the athletes and look at the families they came from, if you're not from an upper level family, you can't compete in baseball in today's world.
And that's just the point.
Minority membership in the major leagues is dropping. It's the only sport that minority membership is dropping because, and it is such an elitist sport, which is what we want to get away from. We'd like people to try different things. Now, once they get to high school, fine.
John?
Rob, our athletic trainers, they come from East Carolina
Yes, they
University.
do.
Is that Katie Walsh's program?
It's part of Katie. We go under Dr. Sharon Rogers,
Okay.
who reports to Katie. Now, what Dr. Walsh also provides us, if you look at our high schools, is 2 or 3 assistants. So we not only do we have now, if you look at one of our sidelines, we have the licensed athletic trainer, but you will normally have 2 or 3 assistants on the sideline.
I think, you know, what a positive that's come out of this for everybody, this discussion and this concept over the past couple months, is safety. And I think if you polled every member of the board and every personnel in the school, they would agree at the end of the day, safety first. So let me say this. There was a good point made on this survey, which I appreciated people, but I don't have the opportunity to go back and ask them because they were anonymous. So I want to encourage anyone, please feel free to contact me because I would love to have conversation about sports. I can talk sports all day long and would love to. But there's a misnomer, and I even heard it tonight about athletic trainers and their limitations. And what I would ask Mr. Chair is that we reach out to Dr. Katie Walsh at East Carolina University and ask her to come and do a presentation to the board about exactly what athletic trainers can do, what they actually do, and their full capabilities. That's one thing I think we should look at, regardless of what we do with this decision. Secondly, someone on this survey commented about possibilities and definites, if you will. It's possible that athletic trainers could be at middle school events, but if we switch the seasons, there was nothing to say that that was definite. And that it's possible high school coaches could help middle school coaches, but nothing to say it's definite. What I would like to see us do is to continue an ongoing discussion for years to make sure we have the proper oversight regarding safety, and that, to me, what this possibility even raised is that, for me as a board member, we don't have athletic trainers at our middle school events, and this raised the possibility that we could. Well, if we don't switch it, still, what are the possibilities we can have athletic trainers at our middle school events? You know, that would be, and that's one thing that I think we could discuss with Dr. Walsh as a possibility. And my last comment, and I would say this to the community, this will sound somewhat insensitive, but I know I had a lengthy conversation with one gentleman last night, said the same thing to him. I'll say it to anybody here, and I'd comment to Coach Gaddy, and that's with regard to weather. I hear the weather and the safety. Eastern North Carolina is not the only place in the United States of America, and I would say people like Coach Gaddy and I, we're a long way from Massachusetts when we're hearing that, you know, the average temperature 54 degrees, that's awful cold. And we have states like Michigan, with Ohio. The NFL Football Hall of Fame is located in Ohio, things like that. So, you know, I hear those opinions and I respect them, but at the same time, you know, we couldn't have the same argument in Connecticut, so just, you know, be careful of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're going to motion.
Can I respond? Because the
Mr.
one
Chairman.
question you asked, our next draft with our athletic trainers, the contract, if we switch season, it is a definite that we'll have athletic trainers at the games. If we didn't switch seasons, because I've tried to explore all possibilities. If we did not switch seasons, we wouldn't be able to use the same athletic trainers, but we could possibly, they might have a couple of them. Even Dr. Rogers could make some games, but it would be, you're probably looking at that point about $200 a game for 28 games. So we're looking at $5,000 to $6,000 to have them, but they wouldn't be the same ones. And we would probably, and the middle school ADs don't know that, probably have to play like 2 games on Wednesday and 2 games on Thursday, because believe it or not, athletic trainers are not plentiful. It is hard to find them. Even paying a good rate, like $100 plus travel for a day, is still difficult to find them. So there are possibilities that they could be there.
Board members, we got a motion.
I have one more question. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, can we close the debate on this and go ahead and move on? At one point, this kind of agitated me as we've gone round and round and round on this, and I just am upset we've spent this amount of time discussing this when, I think just the point I've heard has been made.
If that's their considered action, there should be like a motion to move the previous question, if that's.
And that's the motion I made.
Jennifer, you are, but that.
We have a motion.
I got a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Motion requires a second and a 2/3 vote, and I second it.
Let's vote.
May we have the motion?
We're voting to vote.
Get a motion again.
You're voting
To close debate.
to close debate.
We're voting to close the debate and vote on the motion.
Requires a 2/3 vote.
You got it.
Okay, it passes. All right, the motion on the floor is,
I made a motion that we do not change the sport seasons for middle school athletics. It stays just like it is.
all right, y'all folks, don't vote yet. Let them clear the screen. Okay, vote now.
Made a motion.
Just to be clear, if you vote yes, Mr. Chairman, my interpretation is that things stay like they are.
Correct.
If you vote yes, things stay like they are.
Well, and I was hoping to speed the process along.
We got 1 no and 10 yeses.
I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time, comments, Superintendent?
Oh, thank you. I will try to whiz through these. I do want to say thanks to the media department and to our board chair for suggesting that starting this year, during Spotlight, we feature departments and bring people in so the board can meet different departments in the district and some of the key personnel. You heard tonight that our school media coordinators had secured over $600,000 in furniture, and I also want to say thank you to Perkins Wells and West Trust who over the years have continued to support that effort with their grant funding. I also wanted to make the board aware, probably more than 6 months ago, you had a presentation about us enforcing a state law that's been on the books for a long time, that we revoke driver's license based on failures and dropout. About a year of notice has gone into that. In fact, last year, after each of the semesters, we sent letters to students and their families saying, if this was being done this year, your student would be a candidate to have their driver's license revoked. This first semester is the first time this will be implemented. Letters are getting ready to go out. You may hear from folks, so I just wanted to make you aware if you do hear from them.
Oh, boy.
Also wanted to just say to our community that one of our board goals is to complete and wrap up and have a written plan for unitary status completed by the end of this month. At the February 6th board meeting, we will present the strategies and measures that go with the data that has been presented, so that we have adequate time this spring to have some public hearings and give our community an opportunity to give us feedback on the unitary status plan as we prepare to return to federal court in December. The question was, what do trainers do? Thank you, Mr. Kinney, your great transition to the infomercial. You all know that we have had CNN here for the entire football season, and part of that focus is on athletic trainers and what they do and what kind of safety they provide. They are doing a preview screening this Wednesday night. I wanted to remind board members at 7 o'clock at J.H. Rose Auditorium. This will air this coming Sunday night, the 29th at 8 o'clock on CNN. And we feel pretty positive that they wouldn't come here and invite all the players and their families and the staff to a screening if this didn't end on a positive note for our school district. It really is a story about the story that we've been through here for the past several years with all the components, and I appreciate everybody who has worked with them, Ron and Heather in particular, and our athletic trainers as well. That program at 7 is preceded by our National Board pinning ceremony at 4:30. So we invite folks who are going to be at the retreat to make a day of it, and that will be at South Central. I also wanted to thank Attends. They, in 2009, were our largest corporate sponsor of our dropout prevention campaign, and right before the holidays gave us another $10,000 contribution for Twilight Academy and Pitt Academy and Project Equal. So we appreciate, again, them stepping up and really in a big way supporting those efforts, and thank them. And finally, would be remiss if I did not say how proud I was to see all 11 of you Friday night. I think it is indeed a tribute to Matthew Ward that he touched each and every one of us in a special way, for all of us to be present at his service Friday night, and I was very proud to see all of you there. Thank you.
I just hope that each and every one of y'all, I'll see all of y'all Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and I hope we have a very, very prosperous day. And with that, Raph.
Well, I would have to say that I'm still touched about the loss of Matthew Ward. He was a personal friend, and I thought he was developing into a great board member, and it's just remiss to me that we have to go through it again of finding someone that will sit in his seat, and we just have to seek someone that is able to come on board and start working with us. I'm also very sorry that I'm going to miss Wednesday. because of the passing of my father-in-law. And I just ask for your concern and prayers for my wife. And but I believe everything's going to be all right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, two or three things right quick. First of all, I also want to say what a fine man Matthew Ward was, and the testament that was shown Friday night at his church when not just this Board of Education showed up unanimously, but hundreds of people in that community showed up to show the character of that man and how many people he touched. And I thought that Dr. Emery framed Matthew's life, especially the part of it that centered around the Board of Education, very well. Bishop Love, I was very, very touched by the comments that he made and how he expressed how well Matthew Ward served his community. And also, a lot of members might not know this, but Worth Forbes got an opportunity to speak on behalf of Matthew and did a tremendous job framing the character of the man, and we're sorely going to miss him. I want to go on record and say that because Matthew was a great man, and the positive thing about it is he's in a better home. That's the positive. As far as two other items, very quickly, I just want to acknowledge that and thank Ag Carolina Financial for a contribution to provide 100% FFA membership dues to every student in Pitt County schools that are enrolled in agricultural education. They believe in the integral nature of the student organization with the student in those groups. And I would just like to encourage other organizations, other business, other industry, and even this board to consider that being a part of the leadership component in career technical education is not a question of if they should be, it's a question of they must be to provide those leadership skills. And I'd like for us to see an opportunity to maybe help make that happen as a board at a later time. I also want to give high marks to the HOSA organization at Ayden-Grifton High School for all of the community activities that they have participated in. And then finally, just a quick update of NERSBA. For those of you who do not know what NERSBA is, Mary, that's the Northeast Regional School for Biotechnology and Agri-Science that we as Pitt County Schools chose to be a part of. And we are part of that school system now. And Worth Forbes was installed at our last meeting. And Billy Peden, our chairman, has been made a formal part of the fundraising arm of that group. And we're now in the process of identifying a principal for the school. We had 9 applicants for that position, and the starting month or time that the principal should be put in place is March the 1st. And Mr. Chairman, if I may do so, since we sort of we have ownership in that school, I'd like to see some form of updates from the school from time to time. Either Mr. Forbes can do it, I can do it, or something of that nature, just to keep the board and the public informed of that. Okay. John? Well, I think
my best time on the board to date was a simple dinner in Raleigh with Matthew Ward and Christine Waters out at Champs. We had a real nice time at Government 101. I learned a lot about Matthew that night, learned a lot about myself. And every time I had one-on-one time with Matthew Ward, I learned about myself. And I think that's a real special thing about Matthew, that I can sit here on this board and and interact with everyone, but there's one in particular that when you interact with them, you learn about yourself. Matthew's a very special person. I was devastated when I got the call from Chairman Peden about Board Member Ward's passing, and he and his family have been in my thoughts and prayers ever since. Matthew's words stand out to me not long ago when we talked about exam exemption. And he put something very simple, and it goes so far beyond exam exemption. And it was about exempting someone who gets a C. And he said something to the effect, if it weren't these exact words, I just can't picture holding up someone in such high regard who just gets a C. You know, a C is so just average to me. And that was Matthew right there. But in that, and in the past couple of days, I've done a lot of reflection, you know, about just some interactions that I had with Matthew. And I keep coming back to, more than anything, through Matthew Ward, I learned about me. And I will say this, I think, you know, that was his intent, and he had a gift for it. And oftentimes, one thing that I really enjoyed about my relationship with Matthew is every time I met with him, at the end of it, I told him how much I enjoyed being on the board with him. I have no regrets. I'm not one of these people who said, I wish I had told him this. I don't, and I'm very grateful for that. But before it becomes too late to all the other members on this board, I'm very glad to be on this board with every single person here, not one exception. I'm very proud to represent the community with this group of people, not one exception. And I am sorry that I haven't always taken the time to tell each and every one of us that individually. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chris?
I also feel the closeness that we gained with Matthew Ward through School Board 101. On a slightly different note, I had an opportunity last week to go to Stokes and meet with the AG teacher there who is putting the Latin curriculum together for that program. Has Tim already left? Okay. And how thrilled I was to find out that she was one of my darlings that I had taught her. And so I'll be sharing some materials with her. And that's, those are the nice rosy glow feelings that you carry from being a teacher, and how grateful you are that you were where you were when you were. And thank you.
Mark?
I too echo the sentiments about Dr. Ward. He was a great individual, and the limited amount of time that I had to know him, he made a very positive impact, not just on me, but on the schools and the school system as a whole. So I'm thankful for him for that. I had the opportunity through invitation that was extended to attend the Pitt Academy graduation program that they had, and Mike Lutz did a phenomenal job with that. And it was, although I came in late on the last part of that, it was very pleasing to see the individuals that came up to him afterwards and thanked him for helping those kids out. And it sounded like Mike had done a lot of things in terms of helping students in ways that may, you know, be off the books in terms of doing those extra things. And as I know Mike can do those things, he's a great person for that, and our kids are better off with having him help them. Also had a great opportunity tonight to go to a program at Barnes & Noble. Ridgewood Elementary School was participating in a program through their Writers Workshop program, and listening to a lot of the kindergarten students read some of the things that they put together was really touched my heart. And the little presentations, they took great pride. I was kind of worried some of them would be a little bit apprehensive about taking the mic and going up in front of probably what was 100 to 150 people that were there in Barnes & Noble. But each one of them did a fantastic job, and the parents are to be commended for taking time out and working with them. School staff was there in phenomenal numbers, even though they didn't have to be. but they really did a good job of highlighting what our kids do. And thanks to Barnes & Noble for supporting that, and for the kids and for the staff for putting it together.
Work.
Tonight has been a tough night for me, especially looking over in that direction and seeing where Matthew would sit. Matthew called me about 3 days before he passed, and we had a long conversation. And of course, a lot of it was about religion. He congratulated me on my degree. I graduated in December. But he was someone who always spoke about your reputation. It takes a lifetime to build a reputation, but it takes a second to tear your reputation down. And he always was someone who tried to build up his fellow man, not himself, but his fellow man. And I think it is a challenge to us as a board to continue to remember Matthew's family, remember his children, and to remember his wife. Matthew is in a better place, a much better place. He doesn't have any pain, any suffering of any kind, because he's with Christ. And I think we as a board need to continue to support that family and to support his wife. And there are going to be many times that his wife or his children will be sitting, waiting for Matthew to come home, and he will not. But yet, if we pick up the phone and call and just give them a word of encouragement, that will help, and it will help them, and it goes a long ways to hear from your fellow man, because that's what we're here for, to help out our neighbor. That's all I have to say.
Jennifer?
I think I sent you a copy of the newsletter that is written by Carolyn Reed at Rose High. I think everybody got a copy of that in their package a couple weeks ago. And she's just one example of a lot of great parental support and volunteerism in our community and in our schools. And I just wanted to highlight that, in that there's a lot of time and effort spent on something like that. It's for the whole good of the school, of keeping parents informed of all the great things that are going on in all of our schools. And in this particular case, it was Rose High. But there's a team of parents at Rose that I'd like to recognize, of the academic boosters, who have raised over $25,000 this year of their private money to go to support academic success, growth, and achievement at Rose High. And they recognize students each grading period, and it's just exciting to go. I try to go every time to help serve the breakfast. They do an academic success breakfast, and each time the numbers grow stronger and bigger. There's over 300 or 400 students that come in if they've made A's and B's, and then they have their pace setters that come in, and they too are obviously chosen by their teachers. But it's just a great feel-good kind of day when you go in and see all the great success and all the parental involvement that goes in to making what we're trying to do and recognize above-average students in our schools, so that Matthew would be shining upon and smiling on. So I too miss Matthew. He's a great person, a great man, wife, husband, and father to a lot of people, not just his own immediate family. And I too felt his presence, and his impression that he made on me was always very positive, and very kind-hearted person. And I'm glad he is out of pain and suffering. So.
Mary?
I don't have too much to say. Matthew was just my friend. He was my friend, childhood friend. That it was just odd to hear Deborah talk about Skinnabean Hill. For those of you who don't know, it's the hill where 3rd Street School is, and then you go up by that probation office, It's that real steep hill. And we used to go down there with our skates on, and that's when you had the key. And so, and he did. He used to put his feet out like that into, I mean, he was just, I could just see us now, all of us. But more than anything, he used to, even when we were kids, he was a leader. When we were even younger. The boys' club used to be the boys' club. Girls were not allowed. And it used to be on Skinner Street, down from where Bishop's Church is now, from Holy Trinity. And I can remember distinctly when we were teenagers. I mean, me, going from elementary to middle school, or we used to call it junior high. And the boys got to do everything. We could see the bus, they'd be on the bus, they'd be licking their tongues at the girls, and we'd be standing out there. But we had our thing, which was Operation Sunshine. But we used to just chunk rocks at them. And Matthew would get out, and he would push. I mean, all of those things came back to memory. He was a leader then, and he was Boy of the Year one year. And, that's an honor. Those are, back then you didn't see until you got older how big of an honor, but he was Boy of the Year one year. He was just always set an example for the ones that were younger than him. And he was just my friend. He was my friend, and my heart and my prayers still go out to his family, and everything like that. So, and I will miss my friend. I will miss my friend.
Jill?
Like Michael Dixon before him in that seat, I think Matthew worked hard to be a unifying force on this board, and we have big shoes to fill.
Bob?
Next time I come in here, I'm going to wear my snowsuit. It's really cold in here. I had the opportunity today to be at FiQuest for physical therapy, and it was interesting. Right next to me were a group of men and women. I think there were 4 all total. In the entire 30 minutes that I was working with one individual, the whole conversation was on Matthew. And I don't think I've ever heard a conversation in which they laughed and they just enjoyed talking about him. And so that certainly is a testimony to him as a person. And tonight I find myself coming full circle. I began in this seat beside Don Carson, a friend and the chairman of the board. And now I'm sitting beside Matthew's seat, an honor. Recently, the following was stated to a friend of mine in my presence. And this is what was said. You thrive on conflict, to which the response was, I thrive on resolving the conflict and appreciate the ability to do so. And to that end, I, Barbara Dilda Owens, District 4 School Board Representative, and to all schools, students, faculty, staff, and citizens of Pitt County, will faithfully perform and faithfully discharge the duties of my office. As I'm an elected member of this Board of Education, and in so doing, I appreciate the privilege to serve on this Board of Education. And I serve on this board with great honor and great joy.
Ralph?
I move that we go into closed session to consider qualifications, competence, performance, condition of appointment of a public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, or hear or investigate a complaint, charge, a grievance by or against a public officer or employee, NCGS 143-318 1A6.
I got a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, let's vote.
in closed session, folks.
I know, right?